Wonderful. Well, welcome everybody. We have audiences from all over the places. We've got them on Zoom, we've got them on YouTube, we have them on Facebook, and I have here basically my two favorite buddies in this field. They are pretty amazing, and I'm so thrilled to have them here with me for the first time where the three of us are talking live on my conversations. So I don't know if I need to introduce them at all, but we've got Greg Braden, multiple New York Times winning author, Templeton Award nominee, and what I like to say is essentially the Graham Hancock of America, who has traveled the world in search of new evidence all over the place to talk about consciousness, the human body, and so much more. Welcome, Greg.
Lynn, it's so good to see you. And Bruce, I'm really happy to be with you today. And I want to welcome everybody from good morning, good evening, good afternoon from all over the world. This is completely unscripted. I have no idea where this is going. It's a dance. The three of us are going to dance, and we're going to follow the ladies' lead. So I'm going to let you lead us through this, Lynn. Thank you.
Okay, great. And my other buddy, Dr. Bruce Lipton, who essentially developed, unearthed, and broadcast to the world the fact that we aren't built from inside out, we're built from outside in. He pioneered epigenetics, and he's been bringing that message to the world ever since. Dr. Bruce Lipton, welcome.
Lynn, I'm so excited to be here with you and my brother Greggy. And I'll tell you why, because together, each of us has a realm of understanding and insights that when we put them all together, creates a global awareness of what's going on, why is it going on, where's it going, and knowledge is power. And what we really want to do is empower all of the people on this line with some knowledge to say, we can thrive through this thing that's going on, but knowledge is needed.
Absolutely. Well, look, let's dive in. Our ideas for today are to talk about new discoveries that we're finding out about the human body and how that can really help us through these very rocky times. So let's kick off with you, Greg, because I know you've come up with some great discoveries.
Well, thank you, Lynn. I'm a multidisciplinary scientist, and I say that because it gives me the excuse to scour the scientific journals, the tech journals, for the new discoveries so that I can track them, integrate them into my work, share them with our community. And I mean, we could do a whole program on just this. There are so many new discoveries on a weekly basis that are being made, but they're not trickling down into the classrooms and the textbooks. You will not see this stuff being taught to medical students. You won't see it being taught to students of biology and life sciences. And this is important, Lynn, because the bottom line for me is we are absolutely not what we have been told. And we are so much more probably than we've even allowed ourselves to imagine. I'll just let that sink in. Not who we can imagine we are, but we're more than what we could ever imagine. And this is one of those beautiful places, where science and spirituality, human potential, and the real world all come together in such a beautiful way. And Bruce, I love when you say knowledge is power. And I think that's so important. Because for me, the bottom line is the better we know ourselves, the less we fear change in the world. And the better we know ourselves, the less we fear one another. And the better we know ourselves, perhaps most importantly, the less we fear our own power. And this is what the discoveries are telling us, is that we are immensely powerful beings. And when we embrace the deep truth of our own power, here's why it's important at any time. But now, with the events unfolding in our nation and in all nations in the world, the better we know ourselves, the less we fear and the less vulnerable we become to other people's ideas of what our lives and what our world should look like, because we're empowered to make our own choices and our own decisions as sovereign beings, as sovereign biological beings. So I just want to share some of these discoveries. I mean, I'm not even sure where to begin. I'm going to begin with the brain. There are over 3,300 new classes of cells that have been discovered in the human brain. 3,300. I mean, we thought we had a pretty good handle on the brain. Some of them are neurons, new classes of neurons. The rose hip neuron, for example, is a very complex neuron that took a new scanning device to be able to detect it. And what's fascinating to me about the rose hip neuron, by the way, it's named after the rose hip bud, the berry of the plant. Number one is that it only is found in humans. To the best of our knowledge, no other form of life has, no other primates even have the rose hip neuron. It is a specialized neuron that regulates states of consciousness. When we want higher states of consciousness, we've got to engage these rose hip neurons. And that is a very exciting discovery. There are cells that are not neurons. One of them, fascinating cells, are called astrocytes. Lynn, have you ever heard of an astrocyte?
I have, yes.
Fascinating because they nourish the neurons. The astrocytes have to be healthy to support the neurons, so the neurons can do, you know, what it is that they're doing. But the new discoveries aren't limited only to the brain, certainly to the human body. What we're finding is that we are the only form of life that can self-regulate our own biology. And this is where this work, it so beautifully is based in the work that Bruce has done for so many years, the epigenetics, and Lynn, all the work that you're doing in the research. I think one of the most important discoveries is with human immunity, the immune response. I mean, who doesn't want a strong immune response in the world? There's all kinds of bugs that are floating through our societies beyond COVID. I mean, you know, COVID's out there, but people were so focused on that, they forgot about everything else. There's all kinds of stuff going on out there. And our first line of response is the IgA response, the immunoglobulin response, so that we secrete, the SIGA. And one of the things that was discovered in some of the early studies done by the Institute of Heart Math, for example, and I'm going to look at notes because I want to get these numbers exactly right. What they found was that when we are in a place where we can feel care and compassion, so just in general, a positive response, that stimulates that SIGA response, our first line of immune defense, about 41%, which is a good number. But when we consciously, when we intentionally create the coherence between the heart and the brain, heart-brain coherence that so many of us talk about now, we can do that on demand, and it bumps that response from 41% to over 240%. And can I just tell a little story really quick, Lynn? Can I share a brief story? I remember when I first started working with Roland McCready, the lead scientist at the Institute of Heart Math, and they were documenting the studies of coherence on the immune response. And to be objective, they were sending the results out to independent labs, not telling the labs what was happening. They were just saying, you know, tell us what is the immune levels, the SIGA levels in, you know, in these cell samples. And so one of the labs called Roland back and said to him, okay, you just got to tell me, what is this new antibiotic that you guys are working on? Because we've never seen a response like we're seeing in these cell samples. And Roland said, you know, there's no antibiotic. He said, this is a natural response from the human body when it is given the conditions that promote this response. And the guy said, oh, come on, you can tell me, you don't have to hide it. And Roland said, really, it's just the human body. And the guy says, oh yeah, sure. You know, the thinking is that the human body is not capable of these levels, brain states, levels of consciousness that we're only beginning to understand. We've had to create new brain states called the gamma brain state, the hypergamma brain state, and now the epsilon brain state, to reflect the potentials of the human body without outside influence. This is all the things that we do, we self-regulate. So whether we're talking about attaining higher states of consciousness or being the best version of ourselves, strong immune systems, and everything, the healing response that goes with that, Lynn, the new discoveries are revealing that we're only beginning to understand just how extraordinary, just how powerful we are. And here's the irony. It's happening at a time in our society when we're being told that we're powerless victims of a world that we have no control over, so that we need a savior. And that savior is being touted as technology. We're being told we need technology inside of our bodies so that we can be healthy and successful in the world we're seeing. These new discoveries are now telling us we are the technology. And it's an opportunity for us to step up and become the best version of ourselves for the first time in human history. So I just wanted to share those as we launch into this. Yeah.
Thank you for setting the scene so well, Greg. That was brilliant. I'm going to bring Bruce into this conversation now. Bruce, what have you been discovering about aspects of the human body that are new or are underappreciated that would have a huge bearing on our ability to withstand a lot of the stress, the trauma that we're undergoing right now?
Lynn, that's a wonderful opportunity to talk about 20 different things. I'm not really sure which one's going to come up right now, but I did want to mention because
Good.
Greg talked about the fact that we are the technology. People don't understand there's a term called biomimicry. And biomimicry is understanding if you look at the technology of the human body, that technology precedes our technology. So in other words, if you can see how cells did something, we can use that technology at this moment. And that's why they look in the body, and if the technology of the body is everything that we have on the outside truly came from an understanding of the inside. Cells created community. Cells are like miniature people. And I say that because every function that you have in your body is already present in virtually every nucleated cell in your body. So that means the functions of the cells and the functions of the human happen to be about exactly the same. As a matter of fact, it's because our behavior is to take care of them. So whatever our cells need, we have to provide for that. And it becomes really critical to understand this, because if you understand the nature of the cellular community and how it works, there's a technology. Can you have 50 trillion citizens be in harmony? Well, we have about 8 billion people and are fighting each other every day. And I go, in a healthy human body, that means that there are 50 trillion healthy, happy cells, and they're in a community. All cells have jobs, all cells exchange things, there's even a currency. So I say, well, let's look inside the human body and see where our future is. And Greg is totally right. It's like, why do we think that computer technology is any more powerful than our brain? It's not true at all. They can't even duplicate what the brain is. So why would I put old-fashioned Model T parts in my head, which is, the new Tesla? Oh, okay. And so I wanted to bring up something new. It hasn't even happened yet. Oh, that's how new this is. And I go, what is it? It's based on an observation that was made years ago after the Chernobyl nuclear plant blew up. I go, what was that? I said, well, the place was contaminated. No humans could be in there. No life could be in there. So they made the whole area around Chernobyl an exclusion zone. No humans can come here. Too much radioactivity. Well, they wanted to observe what was going on, so they had a camera on a little robot thing that would go through the reactor, and so that people could see what was going on. First couple of years, nothing was going on, but the third year, something has startled them. I said, what was it? There was black mold growing on the walls of the reactor. The black mold like you see in the shower and the bathtub, that same mold. I said, and the scientists would go, what? Something's living in the reactor? How can this be? So science wanted to find out what was it that the black mold had that allowed it to live in intense radioactivity. And the answer was melanin. It's a pigment that makes them black. Okay. Melanin is a crystal. And what they found out is that melanin can take electromagnetic energy from the air and turn it into biological fuel. And they were living off of the radioactivity because the melanin would take radioactive elements and then convert it into biological fuel. And it was like, wow. And yeah, but here's wow. We have the same pigment. We have the same pigment in our skin. And I go, we always talked about it was shielding us from UV light. It turns out they underappreciated the role of the melanin. The melanin takes electromagnetic energy out of the atmosphere and converts it into biological fuel. And we know this in plants. For example, plants take sunlight out of the atmosphere and then convert it into making carbohydrates, fuel. Okay. Humans have melanin, which is like the chlorophyll in plants, but it's really affected more by electromagnetic energies. I go, so what was all this coming to? They started to look and say, well, if it's melanin is generating energy, how much of that energy actually is available for us to use in our day-to-day life? Well, how did we all grow up? Eat your food. You need the food. The food's going to give you energy. Breakfast, eat that good breakfast. You're going to get the energy all day long. And then you have this meal and you're going to build your energy by eating food. Problem. And the problem is simply this, is that when they did the research, how much energy is available from just the melanin part of our body? 85% of the energy needed for a human's existence comes straight out of the air. And I say, so where's the issue? It's like, well, wait a minute. I thought we were getting energy from the food. Well, I like to say this because I just thought about it before we got on. I thought, geez, I'm just about 80 years old. That's midlife human. What? Midlife human. I say, why? Because the life of a human scientifically should be 150 years. I go, well, obviously we're not doing really good at that. What's going on? Well, let's go back to the food. I go, what is it? When you burn fuel, there's always toxic byproducts from burning fuel. So, for example, you put gasoline in a car, you burn it, don't breathe the exhaust pipe. That's the waste product. Well, guess what? When you digest food, you get energy, just like burning fuel, but you get byproducts that include something called free radicals, which are highly charged elements from atoms. Free radicals, the charged particles. And I go, this is the waste product. I go, yeah, but guess what? Free radicals punch holes in cells. And when they punch holes in cells, the cells die. So it says, wait a minute, then the more food you eat, the shorter your lifespan. Yes, that's what we just are finding out. We're eating too much, way beyond the amount of food that the food is actually killing us. And they said, oh, that can't be real. Well, they started doing assessments and laboratory experiments. Like when I had rats in my lab and we were growing, the rats for laboratory experiments, they're in a tray-like thing and there's a grill above them and we throw all the rat pellets, food for them, pile of it up there. There's so much food, it's beyond, never a need for food. And they started to find, what if you limit the amount of food? What if you just give them a subsistence amount of food? Not give them abundance food, but just a small amount of food on a daily basis. Well, you can see this is why it doesn't work in a lab, because it's easier to throw all the rat pellets in and leave it for a week and not deal with it. But now you have to adjust them every day by giving them just a little bit of food. They doubled the lifespan of the rats. Then they did it with birds and dogs and monkeys. And all of them lived exceedingly long past the others when they were given subsistence level of food. Subsistence means no supersize me. It's just the opposite of supersize. And I go, well, this is amazing because A, Oh, think of all the benefits of this. How's your food bill? What if you cut it down to about 10%? Oh, that would be a lot better. Right? That would be really good. Okay, wait, we're killing the rainforest. What? To grow more hamburgers. What? We don't need to do that. We need less hamburgers. Put the rainforest back in, return the environment back to where it was. Why? We're destroying the environment to supersize us and kill us faster. And the idea is, where's the science coming from? Not from the industrial sector, in the sense
Yeah.
that it changes how we live on the planet. And the idea about it is, yes, there are people that they call breatharians. Oh, these people don't eat. Well, maybe they cheat and eat just a little tiny bit, but they eat just a little tiny bit. And guess what? They have as much energy as you and I have. They can live their life with the same amount of energy that we have. And they're not really eating that much food. Now it's understandable.
Well, I
We're
think that's true, Bruce, because the Japanese, that is part of their culture is as they get older to eat less food, not feel full up. And you see that in a lot of the blue zones where people are eating far less and certainly not a lot of ultra processed foods like are produced in the West. So that is a fascinating thought that, we we can be powered. We're a bit like a 0 point field engine. We can be powered out of empty space. So I love that. I love that. Well,
it
this
just helps us. It just helps us enough to understand that we can save ourselves while saving the planet.
yes,
We save ourselves.
yes.
And just think about it this way. Evolution does not make an organism that is so aggressive it eats up the rest of the world. Evolution, every new organism should have a lighter touch on the planet
Mm.
because of evolution. Plants take the sunlight. Now humans take the electromagnetic field. I just want to close with that only because it says, wow, I could be a midlife right now. I have a chance. But as Greg will tell us, sometimes it's very hard to live past 100 because you lose all your friends, right, Greg? Something like that.
Well, this is
I mean,
what the studies are showing. We are a society that's living longer now. And if we live, what the ancient Essenes, this is where this comes from, the mysterious sect called the ancient Essenes, they said we are in bodies that should last for hundreds of years, but that the first 100 years are the most difficult. People laugh when you say it, aha, the first 100 years. And then they hear the reason why. Because in that first 100 years, a human being will lose everything that they've ever loved and ever cherished in that first 100 years. They will lose all the friends, all the family, the pets. They'll lose the lifestyle because society will change. They'll lose ways of life. And it is the emotional hurt and our inability to resolve that hurt that actually steals from us the thing that we most cherish, and that's life, because the hurt is the chemical stressors that actually deplete the cells and deplete the life. But it's fascinating that we're going to have to learn to deal with that level of hurt and what life means to us because we are on the precipice of living well beyond. When I was 5 years old, I told my mom I was on the 200-year plan, and I think we all can. I
yeah.
love this world so much. I want to see how it all turns out. I want to see all the beautiful things the seeds we're planting now. I want to see those nurtured and grow. I want to see all the good stuff that we know is possible, and it's
You
going to take
bet.
some time.
You
Yep.
bet, Greg. And I'm going to just jump in here too.
Yeah.
One worry I have about living over 100 is my teeth. I mean, how are they going to handle this? But I did want to say that all of these discoveries are really demonstrating something that many cultures before us understood that we are more powerful, far more powerful than we've been told. And the science is only catching up to the kinds of miracles that we are capable of that I've seen thousands of times now in Power of Eight groups. So one thing I want to throw in is community. And you were talking about communities of cells, Bruce, but I wanted to talk about what's going on now in terms of trauma. So we've all been pretty traumatized by recent events, but probably the worst of all is COVID, because COVID isolated us more than we have in essentially centuries, if ever, that we've had to be so isolated and frightened of other human beings. There's been estimates in some of the studies that 1 in 5 of us suffered post-traumatic stress disorder from COVID, from being frightened of other people, frightened we were going to get it, um, traumatized because we had to be so alone. People over 65, there's some awful statistic that it's 1 in 5, 1 in 3 see no one except on the television set. That's it. That is incredibly toxic for us. You know, the science shows, and I study a lot about communal effects. The science shows we were never meant to be alone. We were always meant to be part of a greater whole. And we live longer, healthier, happier lives when we are part of a community. Even joining a bowling group next year, according to Harvard research, will have your chances of dying. That's how important it is. But I want to talk about, we were talking about new developments, and one of the new developments, or newish developments, has to do with the vagus nerve. A lot of people are talking about the vagus nerve, but they talk about it in relation to its controlling our sympathetic nervous system and our parasympathetic nervous system. So it's the longest nerve in the body, starts at the neck, it winds its way and makes a pit stop on every major organ of the body, and it regulates that fight or flight response or freeze response. And so it tells us whether or not we're supposed to have our heart beat faster, or we're supposed to run or stay and fight, essentially, or rest and digest. But there's a third element of it too that's only really recently been appreciated, and that is the part of the vagus nerve that's involved in connection and feeling of safety. And I'll tell you why this is so important by telling you a story about Joy. So Joy had some terrible tragedies. She lost her little one when he was 5 months old. And then a few years later, her husband drops dead of an aneurysm. So she has this incredible grief. Her whole family dies in the span of a couple of years. So the doctors kept giving her antidepressants, because her body was all over the place. She was suffering from insomnia. She had terrible gut issues. She had all kinds of issues. And she kept saying, I'm not depressed, I'm grieving. And it's affecting my body. It's affecting my nervous system. It took years for her to find, finally, a doctor who said to her, your problem is your vagus nerve. Let's get that sorted. And they did all kinds of things with breathing and all kinds of aspects of trying to heal the vagus nerve. You can even heal it by humming, believe it or not, because it's near that part of the body, and humming in your throat and things can affect that nerve behind you. But there were new discoveries that are even more extraordinary, having to do with groups and connection and altruism. There was a study at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill that by a woman called Barbara Fredrickson, who's been studying this. And she found when people spent just 6 weeks sending altruistic meditation, being involved in altruistic meditation, sending love to other people, essentially, their vagus nerves totally regulated. And here's what happens when that happens. First of all, the vagus nerve also controls the release of oxytocin, which is the love hormone. We release it when we're caring for an infant, when we're with our beloved, when we're having sex, all of that. When there was a wonderful study by a scientist called Ernst Fehr And I love this name. He's Swiss because he studies fairness all the time. So I just thought that the name, the name creates the person. So Ernst Fair does this study where he gives oxytocin to men. And he finds that after he does that, they are 44% more likely to trust other people in, they did these kinds of games of fairness with loaning money, etc. It made them a lot more fair, a lot more trusting, a lot more loving. And we find that too with groups. And that's has a huge effect on healing because the vagus nerve doesn't just make us feel better or more trusting, but it also heals so many conditions that are related to an unregulated or a vagus nerve that's gone haywire. And that's what's happened to all of us via COVID. But the big healer, which I have found over and over again, are small groups, small power of 8 groups. People get together and do healing intention, altruistic intention with each other. It can regulate the vagus nerve. And that's probably one of the big reasons we see, so many healings. We see people getting up out of wheelchairs. And that goes back to what Greg was saying and Bruce was saying, our ability to heal ourselves, our ability to create miracles inside ourselves doesn't require the latest in AI. It's already there. It's already hardwired within us. We just have to understand how to access it.
Can I add to that? Just what you just said. I just want to, that oxytocin is a very significant aspect of any love experience because oxytocin is the drive to connect to that love experience. And we've been through this whole lately, that thing called raves. And I said, what are raves? And they said, well, that's where they take this drug called ecstasy. And all the people come together and they party and they share and everything. It turns out ecstasy causes the secretion of oxytocin. So when they take the ecstasy, they're flooded with oxytocin, which is what? Community, bonding, sharing, holding. And that was the consequence of what a rave was manifesting, not by accident. And just the power of it. An octopus is a solitary animal. It doesn't live with any other organ. It doesn't even live with any other octopi, just themselves. But they have to mate. Otherwise, there's no more. So guess what? It's the mating season that is when oxytocin is released into the body. And with the oxytocin, that loner all of a sudden seeks the community of the other octopi. And again, so it re-emphasizes everything Lynne is talking about, is that bonding and community is very important. And just one more real quick thing, because yes, we talked about COVID, and we talked about the personal things that happened to us in relationship to community and all that. I just want to add one other thing. People don't recognize that, and it's a simple fact. We as people only have power when we are in community. A person alone wields no power. And I say, now just think back a couple of years ago when COVID was here, and what was the whole story? A global story. Don't talk to each other. Don't get near each other. Keep your distance. Put your mask on. Separate. No community. It was an experiment in one sense that revealed all the people in the world lost their power and handed it to a few people like Fauci and those people. They made the decisions for an entire globe of people because we were not in community. And that was an interesting, I don't think it was a side effect. I think it was part of the study.
Yeah.
Because we lost our power.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Bruce, this is another one of those places where all of these beautiful concepts, they all come together, and what they tell us is that we are much more than we've been led to believe. And everything, all the benefits that we're talking about right now, we all have the ability to self-regulate these at will, on demand, by choice. And Lynne, there's another part, and I so appreciate you bringing up the time of the pandemic and the separation, because there are two other factors that come into this. One, not only were we kept separate from one another in life, but our rituals of death were interrupted tremendously. I lost my mom in the second year of COVID, and they would not allow me to be with her. Before that, they wouldn't allow me to be with her when she was sick. And even after she had passed, they would not allow me to physically be with my mom's body because of the narratives that were going on around that. And we found ways to circumvent that, and it all worked out okay. But a lot of people didn't. And one of the things that became so apparent to me, Lynn, is that we as a society, and whether we're talking about one nation or the whole planet, we have never been given the opportunity to mourn what we all lost during that time of separation. Now, some people lost loved ones, friends and loved ones, but even those who were lucky enough to not lose a friend or a family or loved ones, everyone lost freedoms. Everyone lost a way of life. And when I say mourning, it doesn't have to be a big emotional outpouring. It's just the acknowledgement that our world has changed, and things that we used to do and that we appreciated are no longer available. We've never been given the opportunity as a society to mourn those things. And this is where community is so powerful, because even if society doesn't give you that opportunity, you get together and have dinner with your friends, or you have your meeting once a week or wherever it is, and just say, yeah, I miss that little mom and pop shop that used to fix my boots, put new heel caps on my boots. I would walk in off the street, they would fix it, and I'd be out in 10 minutes. I miss that. And things like that. So I think this is important, and I think this is a relevant conversation, because even though COVID has passed, we know that we are entering into a time of extremes and greater challenges, and we will all be tested in ways that we either have been, or maybe some ways that we can't imagine. And it will be the opportunity for us to draw upon these extraordinary potentials so that we can not just survive, but thrive, to be the best version of ourselves. I just want to say one more thing as we move through this conversation. There's a word for everything that we're talking about that has not been recognized in modern society in this context. And that word is divinity. For many people, divinity has a religious connotation. But when you look at the definition of divinity, Lynn and Bruce, we've talked about this. This is so amazing. Divinity simply means the ability to transcend perceived limitations. Not just survive, but to become more than. And look at this, they may not even be real limitations, perceived. The programs that we have accepted that tell us that we are limited in our immune response, or limited in the way that we think. So what's really happening is that we are all being given the opportunity to embrace the deep truth of our divinity, our ability to transcend perceived limitations. And that there are programs in our society that want us to stay small and insignificant and powerless victims, that shield us from that divinity. So what it says to me is, the better we know ourselves, and the better we embrace the deep truth of this extraordinary potential, the healthier choices we can make, and the better we can navigate whatever life brings to our doorstep, and be there not just for ourselves, but for our families and our loved ones and people that look to us for answers and for advice and guidance when life gets tough. So all of these things come together in this conversation. It's about us embracing the deep truth of what our ancestors called our divinity.
Absolutely, Greg. I love that. And I love the idea that this is inherently within us. It's not something we have to go to church to adopt. I think a church, when we started out, when you read the Acts about Jesus, his messages to the disciples were about creating, and the word in the Hellenic Greek was a word that meant a called out group of people. He didn't mean a big giant structure, and he didn't mean a big cathedral. He meant a called out group of special people who were attached to the idea of healing and could come together to heal. And he talked about people doing that in groups. It's been altered hugely as it's been taken over by certain religions. And also, we've been made to believe that we are powerless. We don't have that power within us, or that divinity within us. I have seen it, as I say, I've seen it thousands of times now, where people coming together in a small group miraculously heal each other. I'll give you a wonderful example of Esther. Last year, Esther came to a retreat of ours. Esther had stage 4 cancer, melanoma. She was given about 3 months to live. She came with her son. They had booked this retreat before she got diagnosed, and they weren't going to come. And I recommended they come because she might get something out of it, and she would feel better. She'd be surrounded by a group, etc. So they come. They go into, we held it in a stately mansion in the north of England, it was like the runner-up for Downton Abbey. It's this beautiful place. And they went into this antique library and they did a Power of 8 group for Esther. And Esther's a naturopathic doctor. And so she, regulates her body. She knows her body pretty well. She does this 10-minute intention. That's all it is. There's no big priming. Don't need an hour to prime and get into the space. 10 minutes. And she comes out of it and she says, I'm healed. And everybody just nodded their head, et cetera, and said, yeah, right. But they all felt something amazing in that 10 minutes. And her son then contacted us a few months later to say Esther had no radiotherapy, she had no chemotherapy, she only had some naturopathic foods and things. And the doctors who had found disseminated melanoma, found no melanoma anywhere. She was healed. 1 10-minute intention. That's how powerful we are. But there are aspects of this that are really important to understand. We have this self-healing ability that both of you, both Bruce and Greg, have talked about, and me too. We have this self-healing ability. We have the ability to do a lot of things beyond our senses. We even have the ability to transcend time, because time, as any self-respecting quantum physicist will tell you, does not exist. Linear time does not exist. We're in one big smeared out now. So I even do retro intention, and it works. But the big aspect here, and the important thing to understand and to move away from personal development and self-help, is this kind of small community work together, Power of 8 groups, group healing, is about altruism. With a Power of 8 group, 7/8 of the time, you're sending intention to somebody else. And that in itself is extraordinarily healing. I'll give you an example of that in the recent Israeli-Gaza intention experiments I ran. I ran the 3 of them, and collectively there were about 30,000 people who participated. If you participated, write it in the chat, say hi in the chat. I always survey people afterward to find out, how was it for you? And about a third of the people, as they always do, wrote and said, my whatever condition is improved or healed. One guy with type 1 diabetes said his blood sugar is under control for the first time in many a year. All of that sort of thing. But also people seem to heal their relationships. About 40% say that they're getting along better with their estranged partner or their children who haven't been speaking to them for years, or their boss. And about half say that they're more in love with everyone they come in contact with. That single act, 10 minutes of altruistic intention, is enough to create an extraordinary ripple effect out there in the world between everybody that each of these individuals affected by it come in contact with. That is the power that I'm talking about. And this is just a long, winding around answer to you, Greg, of what do we do in these tough and challenging times? How do we stay resilient? And for me, the answer is group intention, in a word, 2 words. Okay, Bruce, why don't you weigh in with something here? Staying resilient. We can't hear you. I can't hear you. I can't. Can you hear Bruce, Greg?
No, I cannot.
Yes, I can talk now.
There you are.
Yes.
There you are. Hello.
Sorry for all that. Yes. Yeah. I found this quote when you brought it up, Lynn, and it's so important because the natural state of biological organisms is forming community. That is the evolution of the planet. It's all based on community. I got this quote because I used it in my lectures years ago because I love the biologist. His name is Lewis Thomas. He wrote a book, The Lives of the Cells, which of course attracted my attention. But I just want to read this quote. It is beyond our imagination to conceive of a single form of life that exists alone and independent, unattached to others. It's inconceivable. That's what I really wanted to get to. The fact is, community is what evolution is all about. And what we have to do is come back into community and say, well, how can we have trouble with community? And the answer is because we've been programmed to be afraid. And I say, this is where power brokers come in. I say, what do you mean? If you're programmed to be afraid, then that means you feel like you're a victim. If you feel like you're a victim, the first thing you want to do is find out who's going to help me, because by victim, I'm saying I'm powerless. So we give up our power and we give it to somebody else, and that they're going to help us do this, okay? And it's interesting because power evolved over evolution. There was different levels of power. The first level of power was just physical. You know, that caveman with the club, he's the boss. Why? Don't mess with him, okay? But then another form of power evolved, and that was the power of resources. Whoever owned the commodities that other people wanted, you could sell them, and that was the money that gave them energy to buy the caveman to protect. So they bought the caveman. And then came the ultimate power, and the power of knowledge. And the power of knowledge is the most fundamental thing, because knowledge is power. And then we started to find how manipulation of knowledge took away our power. And it's interesting because when I went back over this, and some people who are very staunch Orthodox religious people may not want to hear what I'm going to say, but the interesting part about this was religion of the Judeo-Christian version of religion today was based on losing your power. And I go, what do you mean? I said, because you were programmed that there was a hell. I go, who did that? Who saw it? Well, I think there's a hell. I go, there is. Who made that up? That's made up. But fear was, how can I not go to hell? And then the knowledge people, absolute infallible knowledge, says, we will tell you how not to go to hell. It will only cost you 10% of your salary. That's called tithing. And if you sin, it may cost you a little bit more. But the point about it was, first, power, this is my little credo thing, power mongers, those seeking power, there's a code. And I said, what is it? First, give them the trouble for free, and then sell them the antidote later. And so you have fear of hell, and they'll sell you presence of heaven. Hey, whatever it costs, okay? When it came to science, the same thing happened. Oh, you're a victim of your genes. You have no control, and who can control my genes? Oh, the pharmaceutical company can control my genes. We gave up our power to take those stupid drugs, which are killing more people than they're saving. The reality is what? It's not, knowledge is power. A lack of knowledge is a lack of power, or a misperception is a lack of knowledge. We have been sold misperceptions. Even COVID. Oh, it's going to kill hundreds of millions of people. It did kill people. But did it kill it because the virus was lethal? No, it killed it because people were already compromised. Their health was already compromised. The people that went into hospitals had diabetes, 70% were super obese, they had stress levels that were not controllable, and we blamed it on the virus. You know what? They never told you the powerful thing was what? Healthy people didn't have the problem. Matter of fact, when they started testing, 40% of the people that were infected didn't even know they were infected. Okay. So I said, so what was the issue? The power was not take the drugs, not put the mask on. The power was take care of your health, because then we are superseded and empowered to go beyond that. But if you're not in a healthy state, that's when we fight and have trouble and all the issues that we're doing. And this is why I'm so honored to work with you, Lynn and Greg, because collectively we can really provide some wonderful, empowering information to say, yeah, the world's chaotic, it's crazy, and the more you're afraid, the more you give up the power, the more you give up the power, the less power you have. And we find ourselves being victims when, in fact, as Greg and Lynn have been saying, we're not victims, we're creators. And I go, then what's wrong with the creation? The knowledge, or actually the misperceptions that you bought as knowledge. And it's time to
Absolutely,
take it
Bruce.
back. It's time to take it back.
Absolutely. And, we watched COVID, wearing my other hat, What Doctors Don't Tell You. We have a monthly magazine that my husband, Brian Hubbard, and I edit. And we, through those 4 years, we called it all the time. Everything that we called at the time has come true. I have to say. And it was, as I like to call it, the sensible middle path, where we were actually following the science and found, as you say, Bruce, it was about healthy immune systems. It wasn't about this big, this virus that attacked randomly. And that is the information people need to have. It comes to a bigger thing, and I want to ask this of you, Greg, about polarization, about us trying to take back our power and trying to stay resilient. What do you really say to that? Because the powers that be are dividing us more than ever. And we face, at least in our lifetimes, an unprecedented number of challenges. So, how do we stay resilient?
There's two questions you just asked, Lynn. Also, I'm aware that we're probably coming to the close. We started a few minutes late, and I'm aware we're probably coming to the close. So I'm going to be concise.
Okay.
We are all living a time of a concerted effort to break the social bonds that strengthen us as families and communities and as society. Where core issues are being weaponized, they're important issues, but they're being weaponized to divide us rather than being talked about in a kind way that can bring us together. For example, 2011, we started with the rich against the poor. And we pitted a part of our society against another part. An important conversation, we need to have it, but we could have had it in a kind way that brought us together and made us stronger. Rather, it was weaponized to divide us. That tactic then moved to men against women. And then it became blacks against whites, and then Christians against Muslims, and then Jews against Muslims. And now it's adults versus children, blurring the line between adults and children, blurring the line between the sexes. All of these are important conversations in our society, but they're being weaponized to divide us. When we are divided and we feel alone, this is what we're talking about. We lose our community, and then we become vulnerable. We become susceptible to the ideas, the multiple competing ideas and the multiple competing agendas of other power structures, organizations, governments, local governments, national governments, and even our friends, or people that we think are our friends until we have these conversations, So So yes, I think one of the things we do is we can only be divided, Lynn, if we allow ourselves to be divided. Do not allow those primal conversations and the narratives that are being driven to divide us the way that they have been doing successfully in the past. And that is an active process. It's our responsibility every day when we hear information that makes us something that we are not, when we hear information that leads us to betray our truest nature and our true values, we have to be aware of that and ask ourselves, where does that information come from? And is this who I want to be? Is this who I choose to be in the presence of this information? So that's the answer to that question. In terms of resilience specifically, we need to be healthier than we've ever been. We always need to be healthy, but we are living and moving into a time of some of the greatest stress. We've got an election year coming up. It's going to be a very difficult, polarizing experience here in the United States. We're seeing what's happening geopolitically on the global front, further efforts to divide us. We've got to be healthier than we've ever been. So physiological resilience, emotional, mental, psychological, and spiritual resilience. These are all domains that need to be addressed beyond the scope of what I can do here. I don't want to just leave people hanging. I do have I didn't come on here to advertise anything, but I have a course called Radical Resilience on my website. If people are interested in those 5 domains, of resilience. It's more when I was a kid growing up in the 1950s and 60s in northern Missouri, in the Midwest of America, the idea of resilience was suck it up and get over it when you have a bad day. That was resilience. And now the Stockholm Resilience Institute has identified the 5 domains that I just mentioned and how we can address each of those for the greatest levels of resilience, perhaps that we've ever known, so that we can embrace what life brings to our doorstep in a healthy way and become the best version of ourselves, ultimately to create the best world possible. And I think that's what we all want, Lynn. So I'll stop there in the interest of time.
Okay, great. And I'm going to just say one thing about groups and resilience to remind everybody, as we said, one of the big problems is people being pitted against other people with slightly different beliefs. Look at what's happening with the whole situation with Democrats and Republicans in America, with other political parties against other political parties everywhere else, about people who who are left wing, who believe in more woke ideas versus people who do not. And I have found one thing that is enabled an instant connection between warring enemies. And I'm talking about Arabs and Israelis. I did one intention experiment with those people. I had Arabs in 8 different cities in all of the Gulf states, and the 9th place was a batch of Israeli Jews in an auditorium. And after the intention experiment, before, they weren't speaking to each other. After, it was a love fest, all sending love back and forth. And I believe what happens very quickly is when you do something altruistic, like intention to heal a place, and in this case, it was Jerusalem, it activates, going back to that vagus nerve, that part of the vagus nerve, and enables you. One of the aspects of it is you become more tolerant of people not like you. So, one thing that is healing, instantly healing. I'm planning one this summer, a big one where I'm going to have Republicans and Democrats all participating together. And I want to see this love fest afterward, because I think this is a mechanism that helps divided people come together very easily. The second thing I want to talk about is just big changes always started with small groups. Every single movement, whether it was Gandhi in India trying to liberate himself from the British, or Martin Luther King starting his freedom marches, it started with a tiny group. And every movement, every major social movement starts with a small group. So one thing we've done is put on our community site tools for people to do just that, to start little Power of Eight groups in their communities and use them for social improvement in their town, their city, their neighborhood. Because I believe that starting with small, and these are all free, I believe starting with small groups is the way to create a giant social movement. So whether it is just you and your neighborhood or you and hundreds of thousands of others, it has to come from the bottom up. It can't come from the top down. We've seen that, right?
Yeah. Lynn, can you say anything about you, Bruce, and I, December 21st, and the experiment that's going to happen on the 21st?
Yes, absolutely. So we are meeting together. And we can send you, for anybody who's signed up, we can send a link to connect. We all participated in the movie The One Field, and it culminated with my intention experiment. And we're all coming back to talk about it. There's some experiments with Roland McCratty from HeartMath. He's been doing a series of experiments. He's going to be talking about that. We're all going to be talking on that live event. So we will share with you information about it. It is a free live event as well. And I want to start taking some questions before we let you go. If both my buddies can stay a few minutes for questions.
Ah.
Great. Okay. I'm going to take them from the Q&A, not the chat, guys. It's the easiest one for me to read. Okay. Let's see. Well, first of all, this is recorded. This is a good one for Bruce. Does mitochondrial uncoupling come into what you're saying? When I tell my friends I'll live till 428, they laugh and change the conversation. Anything to say about that, Bruce?
Yeah, thank you for that. The question is important because it deals with mitochondria, which was what we perceived as the sole generator of energy, mitochondrial activity, energy. That was before we knew about melanin. So if you focus on mitochondria and ignore melanin, remember melanin is now apparently 85% of the source of the energy. Focusing on mitochondria is not really the focus point that you want. You really just want to deal with learning how to be in harmony with the environment around us, because that's also the field of energy and we're in. Very interesting point when I mentioned about the explosion in that nuclear plant in Chernobyl, and they excluded people from the exclusion area. You know what was interesting? The planet grew back. It grew back. It became flush. The city turned into a forest. There were more animals in that area of the former Soviet Union than anywhere else. Why people were not there. And even during COVID, when we stopped going out and essentially attacking the world around us, it started to heal. People started to see animals show up and things that it's like, oh my God, look at those animals here. And that's because we stopped for a while that pressure that we've been putting on the environment. The food issue is a big pressure, as I said right now. But the point is simply this. It's not the mitochondria that we really have to be interested in. It's living in the world around us and living in harmony with it. We came from nature, and people have like the Judeo-Christian thing is, oh, nature was created, and then they added some people on top. I go, no. Nature was created, and we came through nature, and that is why the wake-up call right now, and I really try to make it short, is simply this. We have to learn to live in community with each other, but as importantly, we have to learn to live in community with the planet. Because when we destroy the planet, we are destroying ourselves, and this is what we're facing at this moment.
Lynn, I just want to add to what Bruce just said. You know, every organ in the human body, every organ, every gland, and all tissue in the human body are now documented with the ability to heal themselves, even the ones we were told could not. Spinal cord tissue, heart tissue, pancreatic tissue. The key is they must be given the environment that allows them to do what they are designed to do, Some of that can be a chemical signal, some of it can be a nutritional signal, but the most powerful signal is the non-physical signal of the emotions, the feelings, the mental health, the psychological health. That is where the longevity comes from. So there's no biological reason why our bodies don't continue to regenerate. It's what we give our bodies to work with. And I think that's what we're all saying. And, Bruce, what you said is so beautiful. This is what all of our indigenous ancestors have always said to us, is that we are part of the world rather than separate from the world. And we teach our young people to fear the natural world and to defend and protect against the very elements that make their bodies viable and what they are today. So this is a big part of the new education for young people is that nature is your friend. Nature is not your enemy. And that you are part of all that you see. I think it's a very, very powerful conversation.
Absolutely, Greg. I'm going to answer two people asked questions about intention and health. So I'll take this from Molly, who said she's on a healing journey from MS and really struggling at the moment, having a flare and not able to do basic daily tasks or go for a walk with my 6-year-old twins. Can you suggest how to remain trusting my body wants to and is capable of healing? I I would love for you to go on my website because I believe there's a video, and if there isn't, it's in some of our material, of a woman coming to one of my events doing one Power of Eight group and pushing her wheelchair away. We've got her on video pushing away her wheelchair. I mean, my answer to that is a Power of Eight group. You can create one by joining my community. It's free to anyone to join. If you want to study with me, you can study with our Power of Eight Intention Masterclass, which is kicking off February 17th. Somebody else asked another one. If I have disease in my eyes, says Raquel, should I focus on seeing myself, hearing my cells, or should I imagine myself seeing normally? How to heal my disease? Raquel, it's a bit more complicated than me just giving a simple answer, but the basic, most important thing about any intention work is being specific. Tell the universe what you want. My intention is to heal what and mention the disease or overcome or be free of any of those positive terms, but be very, very specific about it, and it gets supersized, as I keep saying, in a group. Okay, I'm going to ask Bruce about telomeres. Somebody said, two questions. How is the EE system connected to helping repair our cells? That sounds like a Bruce question.
Okay, first question, telomeres, what are they? At the end of the DNAs are the genes lined up in a molecule called DNA, long string. When you copy the DNA, every time you divide the cell, there's an enzyme like a train that runs down the DNA and leaves behind a copy of what it just ran over. Now, the problem is when the enzyme that's copying gets to the very end, it can't copy the end because the next move it falls off. So that means whatever it was sitting on never got copied. So guess what? Now the DNA is shorter. Okay, just lost that. It comes again. Next time I copy, I come to the end. Oh, can't copy this piece. And then the DNA now is shorter. So every time you copy the DNA gets shorter. So nature put on a piece of extra DNA called telomere that allows you to lose a piece, lose a piece, lose a piece because it doesn't cut into the genes. But when you run out of telomere, the next time you copy, you're going to cut into the gene and you won't copy it correctly. That's when aging and disease and all kinds of problems start to occur. It was once thought you only have a certain amount of telomere, and that means that our lives are determined by how many times you copy the DNA, and then the cell can't copy it anymore. The system, that idea was wrong because a woman, Elizabeth Blackburn, found there was an enzyme that increases the telomere. And I said, well, what does that mean? He says, well, then you can keep copying the DNA and never run to the end where the genes are. And you can just add more and add more. And the more you add, the longer and longer you can live. That's why we can go beyond where we are. The issue is the enzyme is dependent on what? Your attitude and your perceptions and your life experiences. It basically says that if you are happy about your life, you love your life, you're in love, you feel self-love, that you're doing something to help the world, those are consciousness efforts that expand the telomeres and give you longer life. Caregivers live longer than regular people because their mission is, I have to take care of somebody, so the enzyme works. Abuse, trauma, PTSD, lack of love, a lack of something to do, inactivates the enzymes. Those are the things that shorten our life. Lack of love, lack of service. This is why when people retire, many of them die right after they retire. What were they saying? I'm retired. I'm finished. No, man, don't say that because you'll manifest that. So the idea is what? Love your life, enjoy your life, be of service and do things. Go out there and find community. Do the stuff that Lynne says. Do the stuff that my brother Greg says about living in harmony with the world. Why? It extends your telomeres. The longer your telomeres are, the longer your life is. And this is the bottom line. It's all started up here. Don't worry about the chemistry. It was the thought, and then the thought created the rest underneath. And that's quantum physics, in fact.
What is the EE system connected to helping repair our cells? Is there anything you want to say about that, Bruce?
I'm not sure what EE is unless it's electromagnetic energy.
That's what I was wondering too.
Yeah, I don't either.
I don't know,
think,
but if it is, just remember this: thought is an energy broadcast from your head. Thought, we put wires on your head. EEG, electroencephalograph. I read your brain function in your head. Gave us the idea our thoughts are contained in our head. I'm only thinking in my head. I'm not thinking about outside. I say, guess what? The new device called MEG, magnetoencephalographs, the probe that reads your brain function is out here. You have to stop at that moment and recognize this. You are generating a field of energy. And is it positive energy you're generating or negative energy? Why? It will shape the field in front of you. The field is the sole governing agency of matter. Quantum physics, Albert Einstein. The field. This is why Lynne's work about the field, why you got to break this field work. The field is doing this. What are your thoughts? They're not random. They're not stuck in your head. They're being broadcast, and the world is adapting to your broadcast, and that what makes your life different than the person next to you who's broadcasting a different kinds of consciousness.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's say one last thing.
Lynne, I just want to
please.
I want to follow up on where Bruce. So everything that you just said, Bruce, is so beautiful about the thoughts coming from the field. Once those thoughts have manifested in our bodies, and Lynne, what I'm hearing is we've got all kinds of questions about disease. What do we do, and how does this happen? Every thought from the process that Bruce just described creates a chemical equivalent in our body that's called a neuropeptide. All of our experiences, we have hate chemistry, love chemistry, fear chemistry, it's all there. And those neuropeptides typically will metabolize and move through and leave our bodies. We secrete them through body fluids, tears, saliva, urine, everything. When we are experiencing trauma, which we all will have in our lives at some point, if we don't have the tools to resolve the trauma, those neuropeptides don't move through the body. You can think of them as getting stuck in the body, and they'll remain in the body. And this is what's interesting, is that there are studies now showing that those neuropeptides will be stored in the organs and the tissues that we often associate with the trauma. And this specifically, they are looking at breast cancers with regard to these and other forms of cancer. So once it reaches that level where the thought has manifested physically in our bodies, our ability to move those neuropeptides is a powerful tool toward resolving that trauma and affecting the healing. There are all kinds of tools to do that. Psych K is one that Bruce is very close to, has talked about. In our live events, our 4-day events, we use a very precise kind of breath work. It's not maybe the type that most people are familiar with, that lubricates those neuropeptides, and you don't have to talk about it. You don't have to relive the trauma, but it's a process, a really powerful, potent process where we've seen miraculous things happen as well. But the medical community will tell you their body is broken when ultimately the body is reflecting what it does in the presence of what we've given it to work with. So if you've eliminated nutrition and environment and toxins, that's not what's going on, then we're probably talking about exactly what Bruce is talking about: thoughts, feelings, emotions, beliefs that we are harboring consciously or subconsciously from those programs, creating the neuropeptides that become inflammatory, and that inflammation is what we call the disease. So there are tools and techniques, very powerful tools and techniques. I'm going to invite whoever asked those questions, go to our website. You can see them there. Go to Bruce's website. I think, Bruce, you still talk about Rob Williams and Psych K on your website as one tool. Emotional freedom techniques or body talk is another one. And we've all, I think, had experience with those in the past. So I just want to throw that in this brief conversation, Lynn, so people know there's something actionable. And it's a very different way of thinking. I'm the first to acknowledge that. If they are open to exploring this holistic pathway, because other pathways may have fallen short, this is something they may want to consider.
And while we're at it and we're talking about websites, guys, you are having an event in January. Can you give people the website? You're going to be running a weekend workshop, is it? With Anita Morjani and Shamini Jain. And give us the date and a website where they can find out more.
Greggy.
Bruce, do you know that?
Greggy.
It's in late January. I don't have the schedule for me. It's in late January. And if you go to my website, gregbraden.com, click on events, and it will take you, all the information is there. And the same with Bruce. If you go to Bruce's website, events, because Bruce, I've been on your website, and brother, you have a really hot website. They've done a really nice job. So I don't have that information in front. I didn't know we were going to do this. I apologize, but
it's in January.
We've got to go see these guys. And by the way, if you're anywhere near San Diego, all three of us are going to be speaking live. I believe it is the 12th and 13th of January for the TCCHE, 12th to 14th. So we've got that too, and you can go and see that on tcche.com. But do check out their website for their fabulous event. And I'm going to answer a final question, which was all about group effects and how you word things and whether or not we need a critical mass of people to change what's going on. And the short answer to that is my intention experiments have been as powerful when we've had 100 people as when we've had 25,000. The number that was all about the Transcendental Meditation group was talking about a critical mass of meditators to get the crime rate going down. But ours is not a passive exercise. Intention is a focused group thought, and that seems to not need any kind of critical mass. So what I have discovered is even a small group, even 8, can change the world. I'll tell you also about my own event. I've got the Power of 8 Intention Masterclass. It's kicking off on the 17th of February. You study with me for a whole year. You get put in groups in your time zone and get coached by me for a whole year to learn how to use intention in your life, in groups, in your relationships, overcoming negativity, and much, much more. Guys, it's been so fabulous being here with you. And by the way, on my Intention Masterclass, the information is in the chat, but you can go on my website, lynnmctaggart.com too. I've loved being here with you. It's been too short, Greg and Bruce. It's going to be so much fun to see you in San Diego. And with all of our travels, we bump into each other and we work together around the world. So everybody, do check out Bruce and Greg's websites. It's gregbraden.com.
That's correct.
And brucelipton.com.
.com.
Okay. And lynnmctaggart.com. Pretty easy, guys. Thank you so much.
I just want to add one possible thing before we close, because we have a wonderful audience. And the idea about it is it's the audience that represents the power out there in the world. And we're so happy to have an audience of cultural creatives, people who are looking for a better way to get through the struggles that are facing most people. So it is our deepest appreciation that you're out there, because you are people that are going to actually start creating the change and helping the other people who need what you now know. So thank you for being with us, and thank you for your help in the future to help us all create the heaven on earth that's available to us.
I just want to second that and just say to everyone today, thank you for sharing part of your day with us. Thank you for all you're doing to be the best version of yourself. You're already doing it. And to create the best world possible. And Lynne Mctaggart, thank you so much for making this possible today, and the team behind you that is working diligently. So we've got good sound and good pictures, and we appreciate you all. Love you all, and I'm looking forward to our next.
Love you, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you, guys. It's always wonderful to spend time with you, even virtually. And thank you, Robert, Laura, and my team for making this possible. See you all soon. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.